3 new competitions have their winner. The Hurricanes sit on top with their feet up for dinner. Japan gives us big scores. The South African final was a war. And Big Mike's hairline is getting thinner, thanks to a wonderful round of tense rugby. Hello and welcome to the Rugby Roundup with Big Mike here on May 27th, 2026. It is I, Big Mike, here at Big Mike Rugby, ready to talk about all the scores from last weekend and a bunch of crazy goodness coming up this one. Coming. We got a word there. Classic Big Mike. Yes, this weekend sees the return of Premiership Women's Rugby. The Premiership, the URC, the Top 14, the 7 Series. Oh boy, there's a lot to look forward to, but before we can do that, we need to look back. Oh, but enough of all that. Let's get to the roundup, and we will start with our 4 biggies from last week, starting with our upset of the weekend. And you know what? When we look through the results, as you will soon find out, there aren't too many crazy upsets. Everything really looked like it went to plan, but there was an upset in our game of the week. Our scrap of the week goes to Super Rugby, and 4 Super Rugby games could consider themselves the scrap of the week, but let's go to the Crusaders hosting the Chiefs last Friday night. Chiefs scored a try, Crusaders scored a try, Chiefs scored a try, Crusaders scored a try, Chiefs scored a try, and Crusaders scored a try. It was 19 points to 17 at halftime to the Chiefs. Penalty in the second half got them up 22 points to 17. The scrap continued as a converted try to the Crusaders made it 24-22. Then the Chiefs scored 10 unanswered points. They were up by 8 with 10 minutes left. An unconverted try made this one 32 points to 29 for the Chiefs. And then David Havili. Oh boy, was he amazing on the weekend. He scored a try. It was converted. The game finished 36 points to 32. What this means is that the Chiefs are destined to finish second on the table. Our blowout of the week goes to the South American competition, Super Rugby Americas, where there was a big old donut. That's right. Poor Cobras, they haven't had the best luck over the last few years, and they went down 59 points to 0 to Pumas, the Argentinian juggernaut. There was 26 points in the first half, 33 points in the second. Cobras couldn't get a single point on the scoreboard. They are currently sitting dead last and have a points differential of minus 255 after their 12 games. And our game of the week, we go to the final of the South Africa Cup. It was last year's champions, the Pumas, taking on last year's Currie Cup champions, the Griquas. The Griquas had home advantage hosting this one in Kimberley. They went into this one as the big favourites. This one could also count as our upset of the weekend for everybody who's not a Pumas fan. I'm going to read this one out score by score, and you'll find out why this one was an absolutely phenomenal game to follow. Pumas scored, converted 7-0. Then the Griquas matched. Then 2 converted tries for the Pumas made it 21 points to 7. The Griquas unfortunately got a red card in the 32nd minute, and just before half-time the Pumas went up 28 points to 7. Converted try soon after half-time made this one 28-14. Then it was a yellow card to the Pumas in the 62nd minute, another converted try for the Griquas. 28-19, another yellow card for the Pumas and another converted try. Anyway, long story short, after all of these cards, it finished tied at full time, or full time as we thought. 28 all, sorry, I said 26 before. Early converted try into extra time for the Pumas. And then in the 88th minute, they got a penalty. They went up by 10. Then the Griquas tried to get back, and they fought and they fought. And in the 103rd minute, they scored a try. They got it converted, but it was not enough. The Pumas taking the South Africa Cup yet again. Both these teams have qualified for the Currie Cup, which will be upcoming. Absolutely phenomenal weekend for all the other South African teams to have the week off. So all of South African rugby eyes was on this one. All right, let's look at our results from last weekend, and we will start with the big ones in Europe. It was 2 Ireland versus France classics and clashes and Champions finals. In the Champions Cup, Leinster, unfortunately, they got blown out. They went down 41 points to 19 to Bordeaux. This was number 6, their 6th loss in a European final in a row. At halftime, it was 35 points to 7 after Leinster got the first try. Then Bordeaux absolutely demolished them. A couple of penalties in the second half really did them in. 41-19, absolutely wild score. Bordeaux, champions of Europe, 2nd year in a row. The day before, it was Montpellier taking on Ulster in the Challenge Cup final. This one was a bit closer at half-time, but we still had the French team Montpellier up 26-12 at half-time. Before, at 50 minutes, they were up 40 points to 12. Eventually, this one ended 59-26. Montpellier are your Challenge Cup champions. And that's our 3 new champions for the weekend. What a great weekend. And congratulations to the Pumas, Bordeaux, and Montpellier. Because it was the European finals, there was no Premiership, there were no URC, there are no top 14. The Pro D2 had its qualifying finals as Oyonnax beat Valence Romans 39-34 and Provence beat Brive 39-21. They were the 3rd and 4th team, and they will go into the semi-finals this weekend. That takes us to Japan, where we will start with the first leg of the promotion relegation games, and it's looking very likely that the 2 teams who are in the top flight Division 1 this season will stay there, as the Mitsubishi Dynaboars are 22 points ahead of Shuttles Aichi after winning 36 points to 14, and the Blue Sharks could not get it done against the D-Rocks. Another 22-point differential. 37-15. They were actually down, the D-Rocks, 10 points to 6 at half-time. Meanwhile, the Dynaboars were up 29-0 after 60 minutes. Super Rugby Pacific time. As I mentioned, the Crusaders beat the Chiefs 36-32. What this means is that the Crusaders are still in reach of 3rd position and a home final in the first weekend of the playoffs. The Brumbies, they desperately needed a bonus point victory over the Waratahs to give them a little bit better footing going into this weekend. They were up 21-0. The Waratahs came back. This one finished 21 points to 14. The Reds, another team who could have used a bonus point victory. They played Moana Pacifica. They were up 26 points to 7 after 50 minutes. Then MP were up 31-26 after 77. But unfortunately for Moana Pacifica in their final home game and what is likely their final season, Jock Campbell scored a try. And it was one of the Pacific's own, Ben Volavola, former Fijian flyer, scoring a conversion 33 points to 31. Hurricanes blew out the Highlanders. It was 45 points to 28. And the final game of the weekend, it was the Drua away from home against the Force. If the Force got a bonus point victory, they would still be in ever so slight chance to catch up to the Reds. They couldn't get it done, but they did get the victory. It was 19 points to 15. The Drua were up 15-14 with 15 minutes left, and then the Force threw a forward pass. Nobody called it back. Zach Lomax scored, and the Force won. So what all that means for the table, Hurricanes are definitely finishing first. The Chiefs are definitely finishing second. The Blues, Crusaders and Brumbies can all make that third spot, which will then hopefully make it a little bit safer for them as well, remembering that the top three take on the next three, and the highest ranked loser follows through to the semi-finals. The Blues are on 38 points and will be taking on the Chiefs. The Crusaders are on 36 points and will be taking on the Hurricanes. The Reds are on 33 points, and if the Blues and the Crusaders lose without bonus points, the Brumbies could take third spot, and the Reds, who could still finish as high as fourth, will be taking on the Fijian Drua. Unfortunately, that means the Waratahs, Force, Highlanders and Drua, who all had a chance last week, no longer have that chance. Few of these teams are resting players, either due to injury or, well, having already locked up their spot. Major League Rugby, it was first versus second, and the Chicago Hounds destroyed the Seattle Seawolves 57 points to 17. It was third versus fourth, as the California Legion destroyed Old Glory DC 42-10. And bottom of the table clash saw the New England Free Jacks 20 over Anthem RC 7. Top two are Chicago and California, followed by Seattle and New England. As I mentioned earlier, the South Africa Cup final has come and gone, with the Pumas winning 38-35 over the Griquas. Super Rugby Americas results: Tarukas bet Yakare 43-14. Dogos bet Penarol 33-31. Pampas bet Cobras 59-zip. And Capybaras bet Selknam 34-17. It was an Argentinian team sweep, which means that the Argentinian teams, Dogos, Pampas, Capybaras and Tarukas, are your top four with just 2 rounds left. Selknam are tied on points, but not points differential with Tarukas, and Penarol are 5 points behind. Yakare and Cobras definitely out of here. Big win for Tarukas, who had lost 3 in a row. There were no sevens games last weekend. There were no women's club games either. And that is it for last weekend in rugby. Now, if you want to follow me, talk to me, give me a game, give me a team, give me a competition to talk about, just find Big Mike Rugby where you can. Love hearing it. I do. Also, non-rugby related, my soccer team won the A-League. From now on, it will no longer be the Australian League. It will be the Auckland League for Auckland FC. Up yours, Wellington. Bit of love in the comments last week for the Blue Sharks of Japan's Division 2. Hopefully they can turn it around this weekend. And speaking of this weekend, boy howdy, it's going to be a big one. Let's have a look, starting with the United Rugby Championship, and we have our quarterfinals. It is first versus 8th, as Glasgow are hosting Connacht. That is followed by 4th versus 5th, Bulls versus Munster. 3rd versus 6th, as the Stormers host Cardiff. Munster and Cardiff have to travel all the way to South Africa for this one. And Leinster backing up that horrendously sad loss in the European Champions Cup final. Can they win at home against a rampaging Lions squad? Wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of upsets this weekend, but we're probably looking at least Glasgow getting a good victory. The top 14 has 2 rounds left. Toulouse very comfortable at the top of the table. Then Montpellier, Bordeaux and Stade Francais Paris are fighting from 2nd to 4th. A little bit further down, we've got Bordeaux at 68 points, Clermont at 67, Racing 92 at 65, and La Rochelle at 63. All 4 of those teams can qualify, and all 4 of those teams have the chance to fall out of the top 6. So let's look at what those 6 teams are doing first. Well, it is Clermont 6th, taking on Racing 92 7th. We also have La Rochelle, who are sitting in 8th, a rampaging La Rochelle squad, taking on bottom of the table Montauban. And the walking wounded, but the walking ecstatic Bordeaux are taking on the 9th place Toulon. Other games this weekend, we have Toulouse versus Lyon, Stade Francais Paris versus Bayonne, and the big one, Perpignan versus Castres. No, I'm just kidding. It is 2nd, taking on 3rd. Very big positional battle as Montpellier, following on from their Challenge Cup final victory, taking on Bordeaux. Semi-finals in D2, my beloved Vannes are hosting Oyonnax, as the 2nd place Colomiers take on Provence. 2 rounds also left in the Premiership Rugby competition. Northampton are sitting up top of the table, ahead of Bath by 4 points. 1 point behind them are Leicester. All 3 of these squads can still make the top. Exeter sit in 4th on 55. Behind them you have Saracens at 52 and Bristol at 50. Exeter, Saracens and Bristol will be taking on some big old games to see who makes 4th position. Now Exeter, who do sit in 4th, are taking on the 3rd place Leicester this week. Bristol, who are 1 loss away from being eliminated, are taking on 2nd place Bath. But Saracens, who are chasing that top 4, take on the 8th place Harlequins. We've also got Northampton taking on Gloucester and Newcastle taking on Saleh. In Japan League 1 Division 1, we've got our semi-finals, and it is the top 4 squads facing each other. The Kobe Steelers, who finished in 1st, we're taking on Tokyo Sun Goliath. And the Wild Knights are taking on the Kubota Spears. Very familiar contest for both of these squads. Promotion relegation games continue as the Dynabors and the D-Rocks are both 22 points ahead of their rivals to hold on to their spot in Japan League 1 Division 1. Final round of Super Rugby Pacific. The Highlanders have a bye. Goodbye, Highlanders. Thanks for another season. Crusaders are hosting the Hurricanes. Hurricanes have already set their spot at the top of the table, but they want to get this victory done over the Crusaders. The Reds are chasing a higher position. They are taking on the Fijian Turua. They'll be extra motivated if the Hurricanes do the number on the Crusaders. Then the Brumbies are looking for maximum points as they take on Moana Pacifica. It'll be interesting to see where the Blues sit after those 3 games. They are away from home against the Chiefs. And finally, final game of pool play. It is the Force hosting the Waratahs in a game where nobody cares, but whoever wins will finish 7th. Neat. And whoever loses will be the worst team in Australia. Major League Rugby continues as the undefeated maximum points Chicago Hounds are away from home against Old Glory DC. Anthem RC are taking on the California Legion, and the Seattle Seawolves take on the New England Free Jacks. We are just 2 rounds away from our playoffs. Super Rugby Americas, 2 top 4 squads, Capybaras and Dogos, taking care of business this weekend. Selknam looking to hold on to that chance of making the top 4, of being the one disruptor to the Argentine power as they take on Pumas. Tarukas looking to continue their momentum away from home against the hapless Cobras. And Penarol, can they still do something? Taking on Yakare. We have 2 rounds left in Premiership Women's Rugby, competition we haven't seen for a couple of months. 2 teams have qualified for the playoffs already, that being Gloucester Hartpury, who have the maximum amount of points so far, and Saracens, who do not have the maximum amount of points, have lost 2 games, but have a better points differential over Gloucester Hartpury by 102 points. Rounding out our top 4, we've got the Exeter Chiefs on 46 points, and they'll be looking to hold on to 3rd as the Trailfinders sit behind them on 41st, also 41 points. Now 2 teams that need to have a bye, but can still technically catch the Trailblazers if the Trailblazers finish poorly, are the Sale Sharks. Sale Sharks, my apologies, and Harlequins. Bottom of the table, the Leicester Tigers with just 1 bonus point. So let's look at what games we have this weekend. Trailfinders taking on Gloucester Hartpury. Can they break the streak of Gloucester Hartpury? Oh, who knows? If the Trailfinders lose, well, that gives the Sale Sharks, who have a bye this weekend, a chance, maybe. Bristol are taking on Exeter. Harlequins are taking on the Leicester Tigers, and the Loughborough Lightning host Saracens. 7 Series is back this weekend with their 12-team finals competition. The Sevens Championship, which are the top 8 squads plus the top 4 from Sevens 2. We had Hong Kong a month ago. Now we're going to Vallalaloid or something, and then Bordeaux. In the women's game, New Zealand beat Australia in the final. France came 3rd and Canada sat in 4th. Can anybody stop the New Zealand powerhouse? In the men's game, South Africa came 1st, Argentina 2nd, Spain 3rd, and New Zealand 4th. South Africa finished the 7 Series on top of the table, and they have won 5 out of their last 6 competitions. Now next weekend, not this weekend, next weekend we see the return of Super W, the Australian Women's Comp. The weekend after that, we get the return of Super Rugby Opiki, which is the New Zealand Super Women's Comp. So now we've got to find Big Mike's Big 3 games. If you've only got time to watch one, follow one, see one, whatever, maybe make sure it is one of these guys. And to be fair, it is hard to name any games from Super Rugby Pacific, as we're not too sure how these ones are going to work out, and a lot of the seedings are already set. So I'm going to give you one of the quarterfinals from the URC, and I think the closest one this weekend will be the Bulls hosting Munster. 2 teams with horns. Hey? Yeah, good one, Mike. Thank you. This is 4th versus 5th. The Bulls are last year's beaten finalists. Munster didn't make it past the quarterfinals last year. In their one meeting, which was back in March, the Bulls won 34 points to 31. This one's going to be a goodie at Loftus. Second game of the weekend, which is going to give us a bit of juice, is 2nd versus 3rd, the semi-final in Japan League 1 Division 1 between the Wild Knights and the Spears. Back in March, the Wild Knights won this one 32 points to 30. Both teams will be disappointed to have finished so low on the table and concede top spot to the Kobe Steelers. Our final big game of the weekend, we are going to the top 14. Really hard to judge which one of these games is going to be best. You would imagine that Montpellier and Bordeaux are going to rest a few of their players and save all their juice going into the finals after those big games last weekend. So that leaves us with a very intriguing 6th versus 7th contest between Clermont and Racine 92. Now, the loser of this one, especially if La Rochelle gets a big victory over Montauban, the loser of this one falls into 8th spot. And it's looking pretty tricky that they will be able to make the top 6. The other intriguing part of this one is next weekend, Racine 92 have Toulouse and Clermont have Bordeaux, which, if results go a certain way, may be a prelim knockout game before the knockout stage truly begins. And that is us for another week. Holy moly, we are nearly at the final stage of Super Rugby Pacific, the Premiership and the top 14 and Women's Premiership Rugby. We've got the second to last round of the 7th Championship, 2 rounds away from the finals in Major League Rugby, and the quarterfinals in the URC. And before you know it, in just less than a month, international rugby is back. Hope you all have a beautiful week and watch some beautiful rugby.